Yo, what is going on, everybody, and welcome back to another video. And in this one, I've got a pretty special treat for y'all. I'm going to be breaking down my entire illustration process from start to finish. So yeah, hopefully you guys get some out of it. If you do get some out of it, be sure to leave a like and comment and let me know your thoughts down below. Anyways, let's get started. So for this illustration, I'm going to be redrawing this manga panel right here because I thought it looked pretty cool. So yeah, and I'm going to be using this to break down my full illustration process. So my process can be broken down into about five or so steps, depending on how complex the drawing is. Obviously there's going to be more steps, but generally I can apply these 5 steps to any drawing that I do. So my first step, and arguably the most important step, is to use basic shapes to plan out a rough idea of the drawing. In this example, you can see that I am starting out with some basic cubes to establish the head and the torso, and then some cylinders and circles to establish the arms, or represent the arms. And this is the most important step because this is our foundation for the drawing. And if you mess up here, it's gonna show throughout the entire process. So this is really important. And that's why I always preach about, basic shapes and basic forms and learning how to manipulate those in perspective, because that is what is gonna allow you to have a strong foundation to draw at whatever angle and position that you want. So yeah, the first step is obviously just using my basic shapes, and one thing that's important to keep in mind is the angle that we're drawing at. And for this example, we are looking down at Desiree, and she's kind of at a tilted angle. So we're looking down at her and she is facing upwards, basically, or lying down facing upwards. And once again, this is why it's important to know how to manipulate basic forms in perspective and in any direction, because that's what is going to allow you to be able to draw whatever you want at whatever angle you want. So yeah, and once we're done with that, we're moving on to the more refined sketch. Not necessarily the final sketch before I start coloring, but this is just more, putting everything where it needs to be and giving it more detail, like sketching in the face or the head, the arms and whatnot. And yeah, this step is either going to be really easy or really hard depending on how well you did your rough outline. And this angle is a little tricky. I've never drawn at this angle before, so you're going to see me erase and resketch a lot, because this is, once again, it's an angle I haven't really drawn before, especially the head, right? Drawing at this kind of angle is pretty challenging. So after that, after I have my rough sketch in on top of the super base sketch, it basically just comes down to more refining and putting in the details and stuff like that, and making things actually look like how they're supposed to look. And this is the pretty easier stage, but it's just kind of tedious sometimes. It's just kind of making things look clean and adjusting and refining things to look correct. So in this example, as I said, I had a bit of trouble with the face because I've never drawn at this angle before. So you're gonna see me refine the face a lot, kind of adjust the proportions of the face. And as well, it's obviously very important to get those things down correctly, because in this drawing anyways, the focal point is her face, right? Thing that you're gonna look at first is her face. So that is another reason why you want to spend as much time as you need to get things looking correct. I really just wanted to redraw this panel. I really thought it looked very interesting and could kind of tell a bit of a story, I guess. And that's one thing I've been trying to do more with my drawings, is kind of give off a feeling. Instead of just anime girl doing some sort of pose in a white void, I kind of wanted more to my drawings. So that is another reason why I wanted to redraw this panel here. I want my drawings to kind of tell a story or kind of invoke some sort of emotion. So that's something else to think about. You know, that's going to determine kind of how you do your lighting, your composition, and stuff like that. We're kind of nearing the end of the rough sketch here, and you know, still more refining. It's definitely the longest stage, and it can be really annoying depending on what you're drawing here and there, but once again, you know, just take as much time as you need. And after that is the line art, which is just basically the final refining of the sketching portion of my process. Now, line art can be tricky because it can be tricky and it can be really repetitive because you're just going to be, especially digitally, you're just going to be undoing a lot and just kind of going for the line that you want. Now, one thing to be conscious about when you're doing your line art is your line thickness, because depending on the thickness, like the more thickness you have on a line, the more attention that line is going to bring. So if you draw a line and you make it really thick right next to a really thin line, then the thick line is going to be the line that's drawing attention. And we can use this to our advantage. So I'm going to be drawing thicker lines where I want the viewer to look, or where I want my focal point, which is on the face. So as you can see, I kind of use thicker lines on the cheeks and on the neck and stuff. Wow, look at this hair. And just kind of, you just want to be aware of how thick and thin you're making your lines, because if you're just kind of making lines at like a random thickness, it's gonna kind of create this like I don't want to say like unpleasant, but kind of like uncohesive drawing. Like for example, these like little button things on her neck right here, I wouldn't make those in really thick lines because they're not really that important. It's a small detail, you know. You wouldn't want to use super thick lines for something that isn't really the focal point or that important to the drawing. But like I was saying before, the face is where I'm going to use a lot of thick lines and thin lines, and same for the hair, because that is the important part of drawing. Yeah, just more, you know, just more refining, undoing, redoing until I get the line that I'm satisfied with. And you know, generally, like I was saying, if things appear closer to the viewer, you want to use thicker lines. If they're further away, you want to use thinner lines. It's really just based on what you want to emphasize. That's pretty much what line art, or how I think about line art, in terms of if I want to make the line thicker or thinner. If I want to emphasize something, I'm going to make the line thicker. If I don't want to emphasize something, I'm going to make the line thinner. And generally the details on like the inside of the drawing are going to be, or the lines on the inside of the drawing is going to be thinner than the lines on the outside, or like the silhouette. So yeah, this stage can take really long, or you know, usually this is the stage that takes the longest because it's just kind of shooting in the dark until I get something that sticks. And yeah, line art can be really tedious because of that. It's just, you know, undoing, redoing, undoing, redoing, undoing, redoing. But you know, it is what it is. It can also just kind of be relaxing if you're not, you know, trying to stress about it so much. And for our next step is going to be establishing our base colors and then our light source. Now, this step is really important. Well, establishing the lighting is. Base colors is kind of just, for me, how I do my base colors is I'm just kind of just shooting in the dark and just trying out different shades of colors until I find something that I like. And at this point, one thing I forgot to mention about line art is you want to do your line art pretty cleanly, because it's just going to make coloring a lot easier. If you have like messy lines, it's going to make coloring a lot more annoying. You're going to have to go in and fill all of the little gaps and fix all the little like spots where like the bucket tool didn't fill in the color. So it's important to have some nice, good looking line art so that you don't have to go back and fix all these little like mistakes. Like you can see me fixing these little coloring mistakes, or like not mistakes, but like spots where the bucket tool missed. So that's why you want to have clean line art, because the better your line art, the easier coloring is going to be, basically. So base colors, you really just pick the color that you like. you just throw on colors until you get something that you're happy with. And you know, the more drawing you do, the easier it gets over time. Like you pick the right colors or good colors on the first try instead of like the 100th try. But pretty easy step. Just, you know, make sure your line art is nice and crisp so that you don't have to go back in and fix all the little spots that like the bucket tool missed or that you missed. And you know, expect to do that, or expect to have to fix those little spots no matter how good you get. Pretty much. So here's the important thing, moving on to the lighting. Now this is really important because this is going to establish where your shadows are. So as you can see, I put some little arrows in the top left corner, and that's to signify where the light is coming from. So I want a kind of harsh light coming from the top left, shining down on her face. That's why I put those arrows there. Lighting is something I'm not the greatest at, and coloring in general is still something I'm trying to get better at. So this isn't my strongest point, but generally you want to make sure you have an established light source, and once you do that, that's going to determine where the shadows are. Obviously, a part of a drawing is facing towards the light, it's going to be lighter. And if a part of the drawing isn't facing the light, it's going to be darker. Another thing to keep in mind when you're doing your lighting is you want to know the context of the environment your character or your drawing as a whole is taking place in. And what I mean by that is, for this example, she's lying on the grass outside. So what does that tell me, or what am I going to do with that information? That means the shadows are going to be blue. Like they're going to be a bluish kind of color because of the ambient light or the atmosphere that she's existing in. So that's how you determine what color your shadows are. It also depends on what you're shading. So like skin, right? Skin is going to have more of a reddish kind of shadow, whereas like everything else is going to have a more bluish kind of shadow in this particular example, because she's sitting outside. The sky and the atmosphere is blue. Yeah, and once again, not the greatest at this, but this is kind of just my thought process, and I need to get better at coloring. It's just filling in, is it facing the light? Is it in shadow? If it is facing the light, it's not going to have a shadow. If it's not facing the light, it's going to have a shadow. And depending on the form of what it is you're lighting, for example, if it's a rounded form, like her arm, right? The arms are basically cylinders. It's going to have a soft shadow. The form transitions away from the light. So that's going to determine what kind of shadows you have. And that's a whole nother like video in of itself, like soft shadows versus hard shadows. But it really depends on what you're lighting and what you're shading. So for this drawing, actually, I've never painted blood before and grass, so it kind of looks bad, but it's okay, because the next time I do it, it's gonna look a lot better. But so this was my first time painting blood and grass, but pretty much after I'm done shading, my last step would be to add in like the background and the effects and stuff like that, which in this case is the blood and the grass. Pretty much once all of my main shading is done, my main shading and main lighting is done, the last step is to just add in my background, really, and kind of refine my shading. You can see right there, I added in some ambient light on her hair. That's what that purple is. In here, I'm just gonna attempt to paint grass. And it looks like crap, but it's okay, we'll get better. I found a really good tutorial on painting grass. Yeah, this is pretty much the last step is just adding in the background and just kind of finding it to a point where it actually looks like she's in the background, like she's existing in the scene. Background is just gonna be whatever your environment the character is existing in, and the lighting is gonna follow, you know, that same the same overall direction. So you can see on the right side here, it's darker than on the left side because the light is more on her left side than it is on the right side, so it's gonna be darker over there. And yeah, really, I would say having a good base is the most important thing. Like, having a good foundation is the most important thing to any drawing. You really want to make sure, you know, you are establishing your foundation before you really commit to it. And what I mean by foundation is, you know, your basic forms, your perspective, and really your light. Like, where is your light source coming from? Because that's really just going to determine where everything goes. That is really my full kind of process for any drawing. Like, this can apply to any drawing. So you start out with your basic shapes and establish your perspective. From there, your second step is refining it and kind of having your base sketch. Third is more refining and then doing your line art and then adding your base colors. And then fourth is establishing your light source and shading. And then from there, the fifth step would be just the background, if you're gonna have a background in your drawing. It all really falls on having a good foundation. So that is gonna be it. That is my full process that I use for any drawing. Any drawing. If you guys got something out of this, make sure to leave a like and a comment and let me know your thoughts down below. And with that, I'm gonna peace out. Bye-bye.